Okay, test. Maybe a little louder on here, Andy, please. Test, test, test. Okay. Hello? Is that better? All right. Yeah, that's even better. Thank you, Andy. How are we on the live stream? Are we doing good? We're good? Oh, okay. All right. We will get started here with the discussion question. You're going to have to turn your Bibles to Galatians chapter 5. So please turn Bibles to Galatians chapter 5. Okay, 5. Galatians 5, 22, 23 is where you will find the list of the fruits of the Spirit. And so what I'm going to ask you to do at your tables, if you don't know everybody, share your names. And then looking at that list, which fruit of the Spirit do you value the most and why? Now, there is no right answer. So this is not an exercise of convincing people why they should pick yours. It's just why. Pick one. Your options are love, joy, peace, forbearance or patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Those are your options. Just kind of share which one you value the most. Your elaboration doesn't have to be deep and profound. You can just say, I don't know, I like that one. That's fine. Okay? And take a couple minutes and do that and go. What's that? I think, okay, there's some peer pressure going on that I have to answer first. For me, the one that I would pick as most valuable is self-control. Is the one that I would pick. All right? And go ahead and go. What's your order? Oh. Okay, and then if your name is not on here and you would like to receive text from me when I change the schedule of the class, if I do that, just write your name and phone number that I can text you on. And the list is already well into the back page going down. So, yes. Oh, okay, I'll start it down here. We'll work it this way. Oh, you don't have to raise your hand. You can just... Okay, there you go. That's all right. Okay, something we didn't finish last week that I'd like to start with this week is those passages that we are that compare Saul and David. The ones that we did last week, I filled in the blanks for you, so you don't have to do it again. But they're the four at the bottom of your page that you haven't done. And so we're going to be doing quite a bit of this. And so what I would like you to do at your tables is rather than having one person read one and then you all talk about it together, go ahead and at your table, do a divide and conquer. So like have someone do 1 Samuel 28 at your table. And then have someone else at your table do 1 Samuel 26. And then someone else at your table do 1 Samuel 31. And then someone else at your table 1 Samuel 30. If there are more than four of you at the table, then just double up. Hey, you two do this one, you two do this one, and so on. But that way we can get through this a little bit quicker because we do have a lot of this that we're going to be doing tonight. So go ahead and take a few minutes. And then, obviously, after you, let's say someone's assigned to do 1 Samuel 28, 4-19, tell the rest of your table what you learned and have everybody fill in the blank. So the question is, what happened? You know, just kind of summarize. What do you learn about Saul? What do you learn about David in each of these passages? Okay? And go. Okay. We got mostly done here. You need more time? Okay, I'm giving you 2 minutes because I'm feeling gracious. Okay. So last night, for those of you who don't have a sports addiction problem, last night, so it's Major League Baseball playoff season, okay? And last night, the Blue Jays and Yankees were playing. And of course, if you don't live in New York, you're rooting for the Blue Jays because the whole country doesn't like the Yankees for the most part. If you're a Yankee fan, I would keep that to yourself. And so the Blue Jays, it's a best of 5 game series, so the first team to win 3 games moves on. Blue Jays have already won 2 games, and they were up 6-3, like in the 6th inning last night. And Aaron Judge came up. There were 2 guys on base, and he just crushes a 3-run home run. Now, for those of you who don't know who Aaron Judge is absolutely amazing when it comes to hitting home runs. So the greatest Yankee in my lifetime is Derek Jeter. Derek Jeter, in 2,700 at-bats, hit 260 home runs. Now, going back before my time, some Yankee legends like Yogi Berra, in 2,100 at-bats, Yogi Berra hit 358 home runs. Joe DiMaggio, in 1,700 at-bats, hit 361 home runs. Aaron Judge has had 1,100 at-bats. So Derek Jeter had 2,700, Yogi Berra had 2,100, Joe DiMaggio 1,700, Aaron Judge in 1,100 at-bats has hit 368 home runs. He's good. And Major League Baseball players, they're amazing. You know, you think of pitchers that can throw 95, 100 miles an hour. But what most people don't understand about Major League Baseball pitchers is the target they have to hit. And I once watched a video of a Major League Baseball pitcher. He was an all-star. And he took one dinner plate and put it in the strike zone, and then put 4 small plates in the corners around the big plate. All of them were in the strike zone. And what he said is, as a major league pitcher, if you hit that big plate in the strike zone, the ball is going to go out of the park. You have to hit the 4 small plates without touching the big plate from 60 feet away, throwing 95 miles an hour. And this pitcher then demonstrated it by, in 4 pitches, breaking every single small plate. These guys are good. Okay? An outfielder from 300 feet away, the length of a football field, can throw at a runner trying to score home by taking the baseball, throwing it 300 feet. It will hit the ground once and then get a player out who's only having to run 90 feet. These guys are amazing. Now, coming back to Aaron Judge's home run, and the Yankees ended up winning last night, to the chagrin of most of the country, except for one person apparently in this room who's a Yankee fan. And here's what somebody could argue. There were 2 outs when Aaron Judge hit his home run. The batter before Aaron Judge hit a pop fly to center outfield. The fielder goes to catch the ball, catches the ball, it's in his glove, and he drops it. Now, you could argue the reason why Aaron Judge hit that home run wasn't because of it, or why the Yankees tied the game, wasn't because of Aaron Judge's amazing talent, but because a professional, super gifted athlete failed in a fundamental. And you could argue that as great as all these athletes are, if they don't have the fundamentals down, it doesn't matter. You see, why the Yankees won the game last night, it depends on your perspective and what you think actually is the reason. Was it because Aaron Judge is such a great player, or is it because the other player didn't fail in the fundamentals? We were talking about the rise and fall of Israel. Why did Israel in the Old Testament rise and fall? The writers of the Old Testament, as we are looking at, they're not just giving us a play-by-play. They are telling us why Israel rose and fell. And now we're looking at Saul and David. And if you look at now, hopefully your columns are filled in. What did you guys find out about 1 Samuel 28? What happens there? What does Saul do? He consults a medium. Is that okay? No. Okay. And what about 1 Samuel 26? What did you find out there? No, in 26. In 26. David spares Saul's life again. Okay? And then in 1 Samuel 31, what does Saul do now? Saul takes his own life and his sons die with him in battle. Good. And then what about 1 Samuel 30? What does David do there? Okay. Well, and then, yeah, so David destroys the Amalekites, and he honors God by how he distributes the spoils. Okay? And if you look at these 2 columns now, and you see the contrast from Saul's disobedience and David's obedience, what the writers of what Scripture is telling us is the reason why Saul was not successful, and David had nothing to do with their natural ability. Saul was better looking, Saul was taller, he had all the traits. And what they're saying, though, is look at how their relationship with God worked. Look at how they listened or didn't listen. And that's the contrast. Almost all of 1 Samuel is giving us a contrast between Saul and David. It's not just telling us stories about Saul and David that they think are cute, but they are painting a picture for us. Now, when it comes to 1 Samuel 17, and you have the David and Goliath story, and again, and I have what we did last week on there for you, that David is from Bethlehem, which is on one end of the valley that they fight in, and Goliath is from Gath, which is on the other end of the valley. So it's almost like they're coming from two opposite corners in a boxing ring. And David is a descendant of Ruth, and according to Jewish Midrash, which again is not scripture, but it's just an interesting little thought, that according to a Jewish Midrash, Goliath is a descendant of Orpah, who is the other daughter-in-law to Naomi. Okay? Now, again, the David and Goliath story is the turning point in David's career, and it is also the turning point for the rise of Israel. So it's not just a, hey, this is a really cool story. This is the turning point. This is what turns the page, if you will, when it comes to now the nation has been united under Saul, but they're not going to rise as any kind of power until David comes along. Okay, and it's a long journey. But last week I had us watch a video by Brad Gray. A couple years ago, I did a Bible study tour in Israel with Brad Gray. The guy's knowledge is unbelievable, and he's got a really good series on the David and Goliath story. We're just gonna watch one more piece of that, and on there, he's gonna talk a little bit about 3 groups of major warfare, and I'll let you fill in those blanks because the groups of major warfare. When it comes to the story, it's nice to understand what kind of groups of major warfare are. So what I mean by that is that in any army you have 3 different kinds of troops. And he's going to go through the 3 different kinds of troops. And then you should be able to figure out, where would have Goliath fit in his army? What role would he have played? And what role would have David played in his army? All right? And he'll elaborate on all that. Play with that volume a little bit, Andy.
And that will settle it. That is what Goliath is asking for in the Elah Valley when he is shouting to the Israelites. And this was one of the ways in which battles were determined in the ancient world in order to limit the catastrophic effects of war on an entire army. Now, I know that feels a bit antithetical because you go, but it's a battle. There's going to be casualties. Well, yeah, but even minor injuries could turn into something really significant because they didn't have the same medical advances that we have today. What's more, and the more significant aspect behind why they would do single combat, is because it wasn't just army versus army, it was deity versus deity. And they believed that ultimately the gods were duking it out and it would be made manifest through the victors of the battle. And so a single warrior could represent the army and the will of the gods on that particular day. And so this is something that is attested to in the ancient world. And some of you may go, hey, I remember watching that to start the film Troy. Yes, this is something that starts with the film Troy. And it was single combat, not just in Hollywood, not just in, ancient writers like Homer or others. It's actually attested to in the ancient world. And Malcolm Gladwell's book, David and Goliath, in the introduction does a really great job of providing some really helpful historical sources on this idea of single combat, as well as some other facets that we're going to talk about in this episode. So we finally get to David and Goliath. The last episode we talked about David and Saul, and in this episode we're going to be tackling David and Goliath. So let's jump in with Goliath. In 1 Samuel 17 verse 4 we read, "And there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath." Gath is only 7 miles from the Elah Valley. David had to come 14 miles from Bethlehem for the battle. Gath is one of the 5 cities of the Philistine Pentapolis. The Philistines took up residence on the coastal plain with the International Coastal Highway. Typically, as I've always thought about David and Goliath growing up, I'm like, man, Goliath must have come from a long way away. Well, the Philistines are a subset of the Sea Peoples that came out of the Aegean in roughly the 12th century BC, fought a significant battle against Ramses III in the Nile Delta, ended up on the coastal plain. There's a whole history that I just wrapped up in about 8 seconds. But all you need to really know is that Goliath came from Gath, a significant city 7 miles from the Elah Valley. In fact, here's an aerial picture of the city of Gath. Aaron Meyer and his team have just done an amazing job with the archaeological excavations there. Here's a photo of one such place. But the city exists. You can excavate it, you can walk through it, you can see it. Just a really cool thing to consider when you're talking about 1 Samuel 17. Continues, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. A cubit was the distance from your middle finger to your elbow, and obviously that changes based on how long, your arm is. But generally speaking, it's an average of 18 inches. And a span is the difference from your pinky to your thumb. And so 6 cubits and a span is 9.5 feet. That is huge. Not unheard of, though, from the ancient world. We have anthropological evidence of very tall people from this era that have been found in excavations. And so that is a very, very big dude. In fact, it's interesting, some of you have probably done additional studies, and you'll know from the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Older Testament Hebrew, that they actually reduced his height to 4 cubits and a span, so that makes him 6'6". So we don't know, was he literally 9'6", or, did the, Hebrew writers of the Masoretic text, try to talk about, hey, we're going to increase his height because he's so big? Is that why, later folks reduced that height? We don't know, but either way you shake it, Goliath is a big dude in comparison to the Israelites that we know from anthropological evidence as well, that the average Israelite was 5'5", approximately 125 pounds. And so Goliath is a big dude. Now, the Bible never calls him a giant. We obviously surmise that based on his height, but we know he's a champion and we know he's really strong. How do we know that he's really strong? He had a helmet of bronze on his head and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. That is a unit of weight. It's 125 pounds is just his coat of armor. It weighs probably the same amount as David does, to put that into perspective. And then it says, and he had a bronze armor on his legs and a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron. That's more than 15 pounds. Some of you will go and pick up a 15-pound dumbbell and you think, yeah, that's pretty heavy to be just the tip of your spear that you're throwing. Goliath is buff. All right, and his shield bearer went before him. So those are the descriptions we're given of Goliath. And from the rest of the story, for 40 days, he's out defying the armies of God. He's shouting at the Israelites. He's a cocky dude, and he's ready for a fight. And onto the stage comes David. And as David, in our last episode we talked, gives Saul his resume as well as a bit of a confrontation on who's the real shepherd here, we see that on the heels of the conversation with Saul, Saul at least feels comfortable enough to grant David the right to go into battle against Goliath. It says that then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. I cannot go out in these, he said to Saul, because I am not used to them. So he took them off. Now remember from an earlier episode, Saul is a head taller than anyone else, which means that it's not just that David isn't used to wearing the armor. The size of Saul compared to David, there's a huge discrepancy. This doesn't even fit David. If David is going to wear armor to go out into a battle, that's not the size that he wears. And so David goes, okay, so I can't do this. And then it says that then David took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with the sling in his hand, approached the Philistine. Now, just real quick, because I know some of you are going to send in questions around, why did David choose 5 stones? I don't know. Okay, yes, Goliath has 4 brothers, and if David takes out Goliath, maybe he thinks the brothers are going to come. How does David know that Goliath has 4 brothers? I don't know. Some go, well, there are 5 books of Moses. Clearly, David is a man after God's own heart. He's very interested. He has a high faith in God. Maybe it's somehow connected to, the 5 books of Moses and God's word. Some people jump into gematria, which is numerical values connected to Hebrew letters to derive further meaning to why there's 5 stones. I don't know. Maybe David is just really pragmatic. And he goes, if I'm going to take out Goliath, the Philistines aren't just going to lay down and say, we won. And if they come after me, I'm going to need a few extra stones in my pouch.
One, I love it when teachers say, I don't know. So I absolutely love that. And Brad is super knowledgeable. He knows that there's probably a reason why, because the question would be, what I would point out is, why doesn't the text just say David went down to the stream and got some stones? Why does it matter that he tells you there's 5 stones? So there's probably a reason why he tells you 5 stones. He gives you 2 really good options. The Goliath had 4 other brothers, or the Torah. Those are 2 really good possibilities. What he's just saying is, I don't want to get caught up in that. That's a whole nother discussion. There's all sorts of options. And he's saying, for the purpose of what we're trying to do here, let's not go down that road. So, but I love it when he says, I don't know. Why 5? Who knows?
But he chooses a sling, and that is really significant because this is a deadly weapon in the hands of a skilled shepherd or warrior. We'll get to that in just a few moments. We've alluded to this in our last episode, and I want to look for a few moments a little bit deeper at the weapon of the sling. Now, the stones that a slinger would use are not like these little pebbles. These have been found in archaeological excavations from the late Bronze Age and to the Iron Age 1, which fits to the storyline of David and Goliath. And these are huge. Like, these range anywhere from a golf ball to that's the smallest, up to a tennis ball sized rock. And when you put a rock of this weight into a sling that is got 2 ends of a rope or 2 ends of leather and then a pouch in the middle, and by the way, here's a guy demonstrating that. You put 1 strand around your index finger, another one around your pinky, and you sling the stone around with the sling. You let go with your pinky, and then the stone comes flying out. And because they've tested this, that stone comes at you faster than 100 miles an hour. It's equivalent to a major league pitcher throwing a rock at your face, not a corked baseball, like an actual rock over 100 miles an hour. That's what a slinger was able to do. Now, and it's not just shepherds who used a sling. This was used in ancient warfare. You have 3 primary groups that soldiers would fall into for ancient warfare. You've got infantry, which are your foot soldiers. This is what Goliath is. He is heavy infantry. The dude's wearing 125 pounds of coat mail. This is your hand-to-hand combat, up close and personal. You've got your cavalry, which are your people who are on horseback or are in chariots. These are your agile warriors. And then you have your artillery, your projectile warriors, which are both archers as well as slingers. Those are your 2 projectile warriors. And these slingers are really dangerous. We read this in Judges 20:15-16 to understand the skillfulness of slingers. At once the Benjaminites mobilized 26,000 swordsmen from their towns, in addition to 700 able young men from those living in Gibeah. Among all these soldiers, there were 700 select troops who were left-handed. Now, literally in the Hebrew, it reads, bound or restricted in the right hand. Meaning it doesn't just seem to imply that you just had all of these lefties in the tribe of Benjamin, but that they actually trained to be lefties by binding their right arm. And you go, is that really what's going on? Well, here's what we have first of all, and then I'm going to show you why I think that is the case. They were left-handed, each of whom who could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. That's what you call accuracy. Deadly accuracy. And then notice this passage from 1 Chronicles 12. These were the men who came to David at Ziklag. So now we're talking about David's era, while he was banished from the presence of Saul, son of Kish. They were among the warriors who helped him in battle. They were armed with bows and were able to shoot arrows or to sling stones, right-handed or left-handed. They're ambidextrous. They have trained to become left-handed. At least that's what the language implies. And then it says they were relatives of Saul from the tribe of Benjamin. Did you pick up on that? Both stories are dealing with the tribe of Benjamin. Now, here's what's ironic about this on two levels. The first is Benjamin in Hebrew, Binyamin, literally means son of the right hand. And you get all these Benjamites who are left-handed or have become skillful enough with their left hand. So there's an irony in that. And then the other irony is, what tribe is Saul from? Benjamin. What tribe is David from? Judah. David is using the weapon that Saul's tribe is renowned for. And David goes, that's my weapon of choice because that's what I have learned and have become very skillful in. And
one other thing that he doesn't get into is that David was a shepherd. And shepherds, in order to keep, you got these flock of sheep, and sheep will go anywhere. And in order to keep the sheep from going where you don't want them to go, what shepherds do is they throw rocks. They don't use their staff to keep the sheep in line for two reasons. One is that a shepherd never hits their sheep. You absolutely never do that. The staff is for hitting wolves or lions or bears. It's never for hitting sheep. Two is that if you've got 100 sheep, they are not all going to be in staff distance. They're going to be, 50 yards that way and 20 yards that way. If you got to keep them in line, you throw a rock where you don't want them to go. And when that rock hits in front of them, it will scare them to go a different way. So if I don't want my sheep to go over there, I take a rock, whether I throw it or more likely a sling, and I sling it and I hit a spot where they don't want to go. Well, if you do that all the time, you get pretty good at slinging stones. And I would imagine you start doing trick shots. Okay, I'm going to hit that tree and it's going to bounce off and hit that stone and it's going to scare the sheep. But so David would have been a very experienced stone slinger just from being a shepherd. So
he goes and he grabs his sling and some stones and he walks out into the Elah Valley to go against Goliath. And this is a story that has always been told about how David was the underdog going up against the great champion Goliath. And that's true, but I think sometimes we have oversold the underdog aspect, because those who study ancient warfare will look at this scenario and they'll go, Goliath is heavy infantry. Slingers are deadly accurate. The moment that David gets out of Saul's armor and grabs a sling and some stones, Goliath is a sitting duck. that when David gets out there, he sees the advantage, and we read, then it happened. When the Philistine came closer to meet David, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. David goes, my opportunity is now, and he runs into the battle. He knows exactly what he is going to do. And so you've got this story of David and Goliath, and this just brings another level of understanding between David's weapon of choice and Goliath's weapon of choice. Now, one other thing, and then we're going to kind of tie up what can we take out of this story, is that one of the things that scholars are positing today is that Goliath maybe had something called acromegaly. It's giantism. And the acromegaly is a disease caused by a benign tumor of the pituitary gland. And as a result of that, there is an overproduction of growth hormone, and that's why you have some of these folks that become really, really tall. We've got stories of that. Those who are in the Guinness Book of World Records for being the tallest human beings had acromegaly. And one of the side effects to acromegaly is poor vision. And there are 3 details in the story that seem to connect to Goliath not having fantastic vision. So let's run through these very briefly. The first is he has a shield bearer. That's weird. Infantrymen had their own shield because it was up close and personal fighting hand-to-hand combat. Those who typically had a shield bearer were the artillery, the archers, because they are holding a bow and pulling back with a string. That both hands are on the bow and the arrow. And so you have a shield bearer that would hold it in front of the archer so that as they're shooting, they're not getting hit. And yet, he's got a shield bearer, which makes you wonder, does the shield bearer serve more as an attendant who's giving him instructions as the opposing warrior starts to get closer? Because off in a distance, perhaps Goliath can't really see as well as he would like to. Second observation, the Philistines said to David, am I a dog that you come at me with sticks? Plural. We read the passage earlier that at least when David went to the brook, he had a staff in his hand. Did David drop the staff and only have his sling when he went out in the battle lines? We don't know. But at most, at least in the story, David has a stick, singular. So why sticks, plural? And then the third is that the Philistines said to David, come to me and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and to the beasts of the field. Why does David need to come to him? Why can't Goliath go to David? Again, maybe his eyesight isn't great and he's beckoning David to come to the battle line. We don't know, but it's something that people are positing to the story itself. But here's what the big takeaway is for me, is in connection to what happens when David goes running into the battle. And of course, we've got to read this passage. And David put his hand in his bag and took out a stone and slung it and struck the Philistine on his forehead. The stone sank into his forehead and he fell on his face to the ground. Like David latched onto the opportunity. He knew what his window was and he took it. And with skill and precision, he dropped Goliath. That when you just kind of step back from this story, one of the things that I think we can take away as it relates to David is that David didn't fight on Saul's terms, nor Goliath's. Saul wanted him to fight a certain way, Goliath wanted him to fight a certain way, and David had enough wisdom to go, I have to live into the skill set that I have been given, that I have developed, and that I need to use if I'm going to do what God is calling me to do. And so I think that there is something about the gift set that is important, but I don't want to overemphasize this. And so that's why I just want to spend a few moments on this passage from the chapter before when Saul is looking for someone to help him. One of Saul's attendants answered, behold, I have seen a son of Jesse the Bethlehemite, who is a skillful in playing, a man of valor, a man of war, prudent in speech, and a man of good presence, a good countenance, and the Lord is with him. And I think that detail at the end is huge. The Lord is with him. That David did not just rely on his skill set. He lived into what God was calling him to do, what God was empowering him to do, and David knew that God was with him in what he was about to do. And I think this just leads us to just this recognition.
And I think what we just ended there with is what the writers are setting up over and over and over again. David's success, and ultimately his success as a king, is not going to be based upon all of his skills and all the stuff that he can do. It's the Lord was with him. And that will be the message that we see over and over and over again. If you wanted to call that a fundamental, going back to my sports analogy, is that, look, you can be super gifted and but if you don't have the fundamental down of the Lord is with you, it really doesn't matter. And if the Lord is with you and we trust in him, then what other people say we should do or shouldn't do, hey, it needs to be, you need to fight this way, you need to fight that way, you need to do it. Well, no, you don't have to do any of that. And it's kind of freeing in that way. So again, Brad Gray is amazing. His knowledge is he's pretty good, isn't he? Pretty good. Imagine 2 weeks of that. It's a lot of fun. So what I would like to do now, because we got like 15 minutes left, is there's no way we're going to get through everything, which is totally okay. But I would like for you to go to the 2 Samuel 8. And how long is 2 Samuel 10? Let's see here. Turn to 2 Samuel 8 and read those 14 verses. Just read those 14 verses and talk about, so have someone read those at your table. And then as a table, just talk about what those verses are describing. Okay? And 2 Samuel 8, verses 1 to 14. And then just talk about what's happening in those 14 verses. What are those 14 verses describing? Okay? And go. Okay. So what is 2 Samuel 8, those 14 verses describing? What is it talking about? David's victories, the different battles that he wins. Okay? If we were to read 2 Samuel 10, you would read about some more of his military exploits. So when you, now, just to put this in perspective, so not this green, this green is the kingdom under Saul. So this is what Saul was ruling over. The purple, the dark purple, is what David expanded. Yeah, wow, that should be your reaction. This is the ancient city of Damascus. The current city of Damascus, which is built on the old city of Damascus, is in what country? Syria. This is Syria. David conquered Syria. This is Jordan. David conquered Jordan for the most part, at least the outside edge here. And then Egypt is right here. He's almost all the way to Egypt. Okay. Joppa is modern day Tel Aviv, for those of you. And then you have, Gaza, maybe the Gaza Strip. Maybe you've heard about that recently. Anyway, and so then obviously Dead Sea, Galilee, where Jesus did most of his ministry, Jerusalem, Bethlehem would be just right down there. Okay? But look at what David did. Now, for the United States, the two most important wars for us as a country would be the Revolutionary War, because that's when we were founded, and the Civil War, because that's what kept us together. Not saying the other wars didn't matter. I'm just saying from a country's point of view, those two wars matter. And anytime anyone lists the greatest presidents in the history of our country, Washington and Lincoln are always 1 and 2. Some will put Lincoln on top, some will put Washington on top, but no one puts Calvin Coolidge in the top 2. It's Washington and Lincoln, and Calvin Coolidge, I think, was a fine president. I'm just saying. Anyway, but those are the top 2. Why? Because those were the guys pivotal in the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. And think about when it comes to all the battles of the Revolutionary War. Think about how many books and things have been produced about the history and what took place on the battlefield in the Revolutionary War. Like books upon books upon books. Or the Civil War. Think about all the stuff that's been written about the different military battles in the Civil War. Books upon books upon books upon books upon books. If you take 2 Samuel 8 and 2 Samuel 10, that's what you get for David's military accomplishments. 2 chapters. He did this from a military's point of view, and the writers of Scripture gives 2 chapters to it. That's it. You just read most of it. Well, what is in all the other chapters in 2 Samuel? Because look at what he did. How could you not give more details to these battles? You gave a whole chapter to David and Goliath. Why could you not give more detail to all these other battles? Because they must have been significant to the rise of Israel. You know why they don't give you more details? Because Scripture doesn't think the military victories was the key to the rise of Israel. It was something else, which is what they're going to tell you about in all the other chapters. Make sense? It's absolutely amazing what they don't include, which is all of David's military accomplishments, which you can see must have been amazing. Entire libraries for the Revolutionary and Civil War, 2 chapters for David's stuff. Okay? All right. Hey, I'm finishing early. Of course, I didn't do most of the back page of the notes Kind of helps when you skip half of that. But anyway, that's where we will start next week. And I will close us in prayer. But that's where we'll begin next week. We'll start to see, and again, we already have. You've already seen it in the contrast between Saul and David. You already have a good idea of what Scripture is trying to tell us. Okay? Let me pray. Lord, again, we do thank you for your goodness to us. And Lord, even for some takeaways that you give us in the story of David and Goliath, that you have gifted us and designed us and have given us a purpose. And it's not necessarily going to look like anybody else, but Lord, help us to be faithful in what you've called each of us as individuals to do and what you've called us as